How's everybody doing this morning? If I haven't met you yet, I apologize. My name is Trevor. I'm the pastor here, and we just want to welcome everybody to Neighbors. As Allison mentioned, this is a new church start. It's just getting off the ground. We've been here in this space since December, and so we're actually coming up on our first anniversary. And so you being here is such an instrumental part in the growth and sustainability of who we are. And I couldn't thank you enough. Just your presence here helps build the DNA of what this church is. There's so many churches that you go to that they've already established who they are, the traditions and all of that kind of stuff. And you just you almost feel a little bit pressured sometimes to kind of conform to what they are. We are building this church on the fact that every single person is uniquely special. Every single person is not only accepted, but celebrated for who they are. And so by you being here, you're building that ingredients of what makes Neighbors a thriving community and a thriving neighborhood. We believe in a simple mission here, and that is to love God, to love ourselves, and to love our neighbors. Sometimes loving ourselves can be the hardest part, because if we don't love ourselves, it's hard for us to accept love from someone else, and it's hard for us to give love to someone else. And so we believe that those three ingredients of loving God, loving yourself, and loving your neighbor, you see, our goal is to change the world. Our goal is to be that one tiny pebble that drops into the pond that starts a ripple effect of kindness and acceptance, and of accepting people just where they are. Non-conditional love, because we believe that that's what Christ is. And so I just want to thank you for being here. We tell the stories here sometimes. We believe what you see here is very purposeful, because this is kind of a modern version of what the early churches were all about. They met in small places. They shared a meal. We shared donuts. But they would share communion, and they would just tell the stories. I mentioned this last week. Most of the people in the times of Jesus were illiterate, and so when the churches first got started, there wasn't any text. The Bibles had not been written yet, and so they would have these people that came up, and they would tell these amazing stories, and they would sing some songs, and then they would share a meal. It was a simple service, but it was impactful. It was so impactful that we are still doing that 2,000 years later. And so we believe that what we are doing is simple, but it's also deep. It's very impactful. If we can touch ourselves and our hearts and motivate ourselves for kindness, for acceptance, and for love, like Betty said, we can take that out and be a part of our community with that love and that acceptance. And I believe that does change the world. Oftentimes we think of big things, and when we think of those big things, we think that someone else is going to do it. We put our faith into politicians. Sorry, that's a stupid thing to do, but we put our faith into a lot of other things, hoping that they will do the big thing that impacts and changes the world. And oftentimes those kind of things lead to protests and wars and things like that. But we believe that if you just start it in your own existence, in your own home, in your own community, that is going to have the bigger impact. I don't believe that someone like Abraham Lincoln, I'll pick a politician, I don't believe that him being president and doing all the wonderful things that he did, I don't believe that that's the moment that changed the world as much as the moment of when Abraham Lincoln was younger, said, "I believe in you, and I'll bet you could be president." Those are the things. Those seeds that we plant, those are the things that change the world. And so by going out there into our world and sharing that, we are, in fact, changing the world. We may not ever see it. We may not ever see the instant results, but we will be planting those seeds, and we will be changing the world. I firmly believe that. But more importantly, we've been discussing the book of Luke. We just kind of like to go through the books, and we've been on Luke 14, 16 through 28. More importantly, that's my dog. Now, that's my dog right there. That's Allison. Anybody a dog person? Okay, right? Yeah, I know you're a dog person. You just got a new one there. Dogs, to me, are many times a shining example of what faith is. It's unconditional. Your dog is always there to welcome you and to love you for who you are. People always say, if Hitler had a dog, that dog would be excited to see Hitler coming home. And the dog, oddly enough, had a weird mustache too. But it did, and a hair like that. But to me, dogs are a good, shining example of who we could try to be. As everyone knows, it was mentioned before, I have a great influence of Fred Rogers. To me, a dog is Fred Rogers to the world. It just, and if you don't like dogs, that's fine. It can be another pet or another thing in your life. But if you're a cat person, you're wrong. But, dogs are, I'm sorry. But dogs, holy, cats, devil. But no, I'm kidding because you like cats. I know I'm kidding you, but I'm hoping to change you eventually. But when I was growing up, a lot of people know my story. I grew up in a very abusive family, but the thing that kept me going was my dog. I had a dog, and that dog loved me for who I was and was always there. Slept in my bed, oftentimes would steal food and hide it in my bed. I'd go to bed at night, and there'd be like half a steak there or something, or we'd share it together. So, but it was those kind of things, that kind of love that keeps us going in our lives. And when I was also a kid, next door to us, the neighbors got a golden lab because he was going to be a hunter, and he was going to train the dog to hunt. And he bought all the equipment and everything. And so the dog got this kennel in the back, and we could see the kennel. Our garage was right next to the kennel. And so when we would come home from school or something, we would go and we would pet the dog. Dog's name was Lady. As many things in our lives, we get excited about something, and our neighbor got excited about starting to hunt, and he went out and bought all of the equipment, the camouflage stuff, the guns and everything like that. But the energy of that started to wane a little bit. And Lady sat in this kennel day in, day out. And it got so much that our neighbor never did the hunting thing. And Lady became something almost like an exercise equipment. You get something, you're excited about it, and eventually you don't do anything, and the exercise equipment just sits in the corner and is ignored. Lady became ignored. So much so that we would come home and we would notice that Lady wasn't having any food or water. And Lady was the nicest dog in the world. As you could imagine, the feeling of Lady, the physique, she started to get thinner. And no matter how thin she looked, she always ran to the fence to see us. Always ran to the fence to show love to us. And so we started, this was the 70s, so there wasn't a whole lot of knowledge about calling people or authorities. People didn't didn't do that very much. And so what we would do is we would sneak food and water over there. Whatever our dog was having, Lady would have too. And we would take bags of dog food and we would dump it into the fence. Or we would take a hose and we would try to fill the Lady's water. And winters would come. And we would try to we would throw blankets over the fence because the fence had an open thing. So in the winter when it snowed, the kennel filled with snow. But every time that we came there, every time that we came home, Lady was there to show us love. If anyone ever had any excuse to be unloving or resentful, it was this dog, Lady. And so we continued to try to feed her and give her water and things like that. I mean, we would see her licking ice, the frozen floor of the kennel. And Lady started to look even more sickly, even though we were trying to feed her all the time. And tragically, what happened was that Lady kept trying to escape. And so what the owner did, the owner that bought Lady to be part of something that he wanted to do to be a life-changing event. He wanted to do this, get into hunting and everything like that. Lady became a nuisance to him. A nuisance because Lady would escape and people would wonder where she was and everything. And so inside the kennel, he also chained her up. And what happened was that Lady tried to escape again by actually crawling over the kennel gate. And Lady hung herself. And I remember just being really sad about that. Still, when I think about it, being a dog person that I am, extremely sad about that. As I said when I started this, dogs can be an example of faith. Many times, we want to be faithful. We want to have something to believe in. We want to put something into our lives that changes our heart and, like I said, changes the world. But if we don't feed it, if we don't take care of it, it can turn into something that fades away. Even though from the whole time, Lady was there wanting to share love, wanting to be there to share love. It's almost as if Lady, with her last breath, was wanting to share love. Every time that we went there, Lady jumped to the fence and wanted to just share love. Our faith can be like that. Jesus is talking to people, and he says there's this, he's talking about faith. And he's talking about God's love for people. And he says there was this huge, there was a guy that was going to throw this huge banquet. And in those days, in the first century, people would send out 2 invitations. They would send out one that this is going to be planned, and then they would send out an official one that this is going to be a thing. And he tells his servants to go send out invitations to all my friends, everyone that knows me. And the servants give it, and they take it to one person. The one person says, I just got a new house. I'm busy doing that. I'm going to pass on this one. And someone else says, I'm involved in this. Every one of them had an excuse, one form or another, of things that they just couldn't spare the time to go and have a celebration of this dinner with this person. I can't spare it. I have to focus on my things first. And so the servants came back to the owner, and they said, no one actually wants to come. They're all involved in other things. And the servant mourned. And he said, I tell you what, send out all the invitations to anybody that you see in the streets, anybody that you can see that should have a meal, anybody that ever feels like they're not invited to a party, anybody that wouldn't be invited to a party. I want you to go and I want you to invite them. And once you've invited them, as many of them that agree to come to have dinner with me, then go invite even more people. Because if the people that aren't close to me want to be there, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go through the ones that want to come in but have never been allowed in. Tell them that dinner is here and we're going to celebrate. And see, Jesus was talking to people that were Hebrew at the time, people that felt because they were they had an ancestor named Abraham, which was the father of that faith. They felt that just by having that in their bloodline, they were a shoo-in for the kingdom of God, and they didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to worry about anything. They didn't have to lift a finger, and they did not have to care for their neighbor. They did not have to show love because they were going to the kingdom of heaven because it said so on a piece of paper that they were part of this bloodline. And the message that Jesus was trying to tell them is that love is for everybody. And it goes two ways. God is there inviting us to be part of the kingdom of heaven. But we should never take it for granted. Because our job by trying to be invited into that kingdom of heaven, by being unconditionally accepted into that kingdom, our job is to go out and invite the other people too. That's what our job is. Our job is to be a dog. Our job is to be always showing love to somebody else. If Lady could speak, when we brought her the food, she'd probably say, do you want to share it with me? Because that's the way dogs are. Some of them are like this, but we can be like that. Even in the times when we think that we have stuff and we are busy with all of this kind of stuff, or that we are going through a troubled time like Lady was, we can still share love. Because sometimes that's the only thing that we have. And it's the one thing. It's the one thing that we desperately need. That's what faith is. We can be there with our faith. Will and I were talking about, or Luke, whatever you want to call yourself, we can, it's like joining the gym. The first of the year you think, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to join the gym. I'm going to pay the thing, and my life is going to change and all this stuff. And I don't know why your voice sounds like this, but it's still, you go in there, and then you might go one or two times. But if you don't make it an actual practice, it doesn't turn into a life changer. It turns into a once-in-a-while thing, and then it eventually dies off. The neighbor that bought the hunting equipment was ready to make a life-changing event, and it died off. I want to invite us to practice our faith. Practice it daily. Practice it enough to where it becomes a life changer. Don't put it in a kennel somewhere. Don't assume that you're clear, because the minute that we start to think I'm clear, we start to think less about who needs to hear this message. And there are people that need to hear this message. We need to hear this message of love. But we need to share this message of love, and that's how we practice our faith. That is how you practice your faith. I could give you a 10-step thing of every morning, get on your knees and pray, and then do this, read this chapter out of this book, or do this kind of thing, and, well, by all means, come to church on Sunday. We really do need you to come to church on Sunday. But more importantly, when we share love with our neighbor, when we share love with ourselves, we are sharing faith. Is your faith in a kennel, or is your faith in your heart? Because if it is, you'll share it.